Number 5. He is perhaps a little too blank over his mother's ill health. He seems to believe that there is nothing to worry about, when in fact her condition is quite blank. So if we look at the second part first, it says he seems to believe that there is nothing to worry about, when in fact. So when in fact is a great contrast trigger here. So we know that he seems to think that there's nothing, but in fact her condition is quite blank. So the blank is going to be totally contradictory to nothing to worry about. So maybe something along the lines of serious. And then going back to that first portion of the sentence, it says he is perhaps a little bit too blank. So this is describing his kind of laid back attitude about his mother's health. So you could use a word like laid back as your prediction, because he is thinking that there's really nothing to worry about when in fact there is. So we're going to call this guy laid back. Alright, so now moving on to the answer choices. A says grave for the second blank. Now, grave, if you have never heard of it as an adjective, you definitely have heard of it as a noun. And you've heard of it at a funeral site. So clearly it's definitely something serious. The adjective form of grave means very serious, very intense. So this goes perfectly with what we need. Acute. Now, this is another word that you've probably heard in your math class referring to angles. So an angle that's acute is less than 90, but that doesn't really have a place here in this sentence. So this is also what we would call a false friend. It looks like it's friendly, that we know it, but there's actually a second meaning. So you might want to put that in as a mystery. Then we get to droll, and it's a good word to know, but I'm guessing you haven't heard of it, so we're going to give that one a mystery as well. And then you have latent, probably another word that you don't know. So go ahead and give that one a question mark too. And then the last is critical, which also works. So she's in critical condition, that means it's very serious. So now we're going to switch over and look at the first blank. So looking at A, it says immutable. So mute is a fantastic root that you should definitely know. And you've probably heard it at the start of mutation or mutate, which means to change. And if something is immutable, we know that im means not. So immutable means not changeable. So if we're trying to describe someone who's really laid back, that doesn't really fit in with someone who's really rigid and immutable. So we're going to get rid of A. Then looking down at B, it says insouciant. So that's probably something that you haven't heard of. So that gets another mystery. Then impassive. So if someone is passive, that would be something along the lines of being laid back. So if someone is impassive, you could almost say that it's the opposite of that. So that's not really what we want here, since we want laid back. Then D says inveterate. Now, if you're thinking about words that you want for laid back, veterate sounds like a vet or a veteran, and it probably is not going to coincide very well with laid back. So even if you don't know what inveterate means, the root should probably clue you in that it's not the connotation that you want. So that's out. And then lastly, we have inept, which you probably aren't sure about. So you're left with 2, and in this case, you probably would have gone with E because it has a check and B has 2 question marks, but the answer is actually B, because inept means lacking in skill. It's a great SAT word to know, and it's an antonym for adept. So this is a fantastic use of prefixes. So inept has in, so that's lacking in skill. Adept means extremely skilled or highly skilled. So inept, adept, you should know those. And now we know that E is out. And we look at B, acute is another great word that you should know. It means very serious, very critical, very intense. So that is going to be B.